Costas Photo, thank you for joining in. Joe, I see you. Thank you. Nat, I got you. Let's get this thing started. Hey, babe. Welcome to the Positive Impact Podcast, where we talk about all topics related to the game that I love. I am your host, Terrell Dozier, and this evening, my guest is senior official NBA photographer Nat Butler. There he is.
Hey, Terrell, how are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good. I see. We both need a little bit of a shave there.
You know, mine's a little whiter than I'd like to think. I don't know what's going on there.
Father Time is undefeated, man.
You know what? You got that right.
It's good to see you. Good to have you on, man.
Same. This is going to be fun. Thanks for the invite, man.
Absolutely. So first question I always ask is, how you and your family are doing at this time with the pandemic and everything.
You know what? Thanks for asking. Everybody's good. Thankfully, I'm in New Jersey now. I have my two boys, my wife and two boys with me. My daughter is actually in Zambia in Africa, but she's all safe. She's been there for a few months. She has a nonprofit that she runs over there, but she's all good. So everybody's good. Thank you. And I'm hoping the same for you.
Yeah, we're doing great here. My wife says hello. Big fan of, she's a big fan of yours. So let's get right into it. What's special about this to me is obviously, we come from the same hometown out in East Hampton. So, it was great, growing up. And I remember the first time that I heard about you, everybody used to buy posters and stuff. That was like the big thing, to hang posters on the wall. And, one of my friends came up to me and said, you see this guy, Nat Butler? I said, yeah, he's on all my posters and stuff. He's like, yeah, that's Nat Butler from East Hampton. I was like, really? So, you know what I mean? Like, so that was kind of cool. But talk about growing up in East Hampton. Did you have a sports background, and how you fell in love with photography?
You know what? It was a combination. Obviously, grew up playing sports. I was a big hooper. I loved basketball right from the jump. And growing up, I grew up in Montauk. Went to East Hampton High School, and we had some good squads back in the day. So we aspired. My class. I graduated high school in '80. Keep that on the down low, how old I am. But the guys that came before us, you came a little after. Like there was a huge basketball tradition, not only in East Hampton but out east with Bridgehampton and whatnot. So it all started there. I just loved the game.
Some technical difficulties here, so we're going to get him back on. But welcome to everybody who's tuning in for our conversation with NBA official senior photographer Nat Butler. When he gets back on, we'll get you right back with him. But we appreciate you guys showing up tonight for the Positive Impact Podcast. I see a lot of new faces on here. Make sure you go follow us on Instagram at Positive Impact NY for more content. We are also on YouTube, and we're on Anchor as well. Let me text Nat to make sure. John Bo was good. Smoothie, what's happening, man? There you go.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Sorry, squad.
No problem. You look much clearer too on this one.
Well,
So so go ahead. You said you grew up, you grew up playing, you wanted to play ball.
yeah, we played in high school, and like I said, East Hampton, we had a crazy tradition with the Coach Petrie, and his kids played years before us, and the whole squad. So that sort of set the tone when I was younger. You aspired to be like those guys. We weren't as good, but then that reinforced my love of basketball for sure. Went to St. John's University after that. Was nowhere near good enough to play at St. John's. In those days, they had Chris Mullen, Mark Jackson, Walter.
Yeah.
Like, they was serious squad. But I was friends with all those guys, so I'd hang out in the gym, and started taking pictures, and it sort of took off from there.
Interesting. So after you left St. John's, I believe you started. How did you get to Sports Illustrated, which got your start?
You know what? During my time at St. John's, I would bump into the Sports Illustrated people because they would be covering the games at the Garden. It was St. John's, Georgetown. Big East was in its heyday,
Absolutely.
mid '80s, early '80s. So I got to know a couple of those guys and started assisting with them, which is basically in photography lingo, it's like a apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the greatest experience I could ever get, because those guys are legends and king of kings, all those, Sports Illustrated photographers. So it's perfect time for me to learn from them. Went from that into doing some stuff for NBA. NBA didn't have a photo department at that time. And they had a new commissioner, 84, with David Stern. He wanted to archive the NBA. He had a big sense of history. They had done a similar thing on the video side, which you're now seeing a lot of that MJ stuff. So we were like, hey, we put our heads together. Let's start. Myself and a guy on the West Coast, Andy Bernstein. We were like, let's start a photo group, and we sort of needed a job and created a job for ourselves.
Absolutely.
So it's been kind of a fun ride.
So yeah, so when I referenced those posters, that we used to always get when we were younger, if it wasn't your name on it, it was Andy Bernstein's name on it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, even if you don't know photographers, like you got, those two names in photography, because like I said, on every great poster, it was either one of you guys doing it. So 1984 was just a special league for the NBA in general. You know what I mean? It bought us MJ, you know what I mean? And
right.
It bought us Nat Butler at the same time. So that you must tell that story a lot.
No, we joke around. I tell people I'm part of the famous class of 1984. But it's kind of funny. But a crazy story about the posters was the first time I ever met Kobe Bryant. Was as a rookie right before the draft, and he was looking at me, and I introduced myself to him, and he goes, "Oh, you're Nathaniel Butler," and I was like, "Yeah, like, how do you know who?" And he goes, "Oh, when I was a kid, man, I'd just lie in bed, and he had MJ posters. He grew up in Italy because his dad was a professional player in Italy, and he had MJ posters and other guys, but primarily MJ, hanging up in his room, and he saw the name on there, and it's just kind of a crazy story." He said a similar story to Andy, and after getting to know Kobe, you'd realize that that's not surprising to him or for him, because that's his whole being, is into those little details. No one looks at those names except us as the photographer, but he had seen those names, so
Absolutely.
that was pretty special for me.
Nah, it had to be, especially, especially now. Rest in peace to Kobe. So talk about, obviously things have changed, with technology now and everything like that. But talk about when you first started out, like what was it like going to an NBA game and shooting a game, and how did you get film, like to the NBA?
Right. No, it was totally different now. We're in the digital age where people want stuff instantaneously. But back in those days, we're shooting film. A lot of times I was shooting black and white film. I couldn't afford to buy much film. I'd shoot like 2 rolls a game. Go back to my apartment. I was living in Queens after being at St. John's, and go back. I had converted a closet into a dark room, go back, develop the shots, and then give the shots like the next day to the NBA. It was mostly me covering press conferences, events, and then going to the games as almost like an afterthought, but starting to develop a library,
Right.
and it evolved. Andy was doing a similar thing in LA. He had the Clippers and Lakers. I had Knicks and Nets were in New Jersey at that time. So you're basically shooting stock to develop an archive.
Right.
Went from black and white. Then we started using strobe lights and started shooting film, and that was a little different. But crazy times, which I'd shoot the NBA finals, go back to my hotel room, and develop the film. And you're like in the hotel, like in the bathroom of the hotel, looking at the shots you got. It was totally different, Now, NBA is sort of at the forefront with sports and social media. I think they have 30 million Instagram follows, 50 million, something crazy. Like I press the button on the camera, they get the shot 5 seconds later, and they'll push it out in under a minute or two. So it's gone from developing that film to instantaneous fans all over the world seeing the images.
So explain that process. Like you just said, like you take a picture and somebody gets it immediately. Is that a feature on a camera that you have, or like how does that work?
Well, yeah, it's a lot of work. You know how when you watch a game, it's very similar. They're like, oh, let's go to Secaucus for a review. The referees all huddle up and they go to Secaucus is kind of like the headquarters for that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Similarly, for our photos, we have night editors, and there's a whole photo staff behind the scenes working diligently on all the games, and they get our live stream of photos into Secaucus headquarters, and then they push it right out. But it is a lot of work. Like typically a 7:30 game, I go to the arena at 2 p.m. to start setting up. There's a lot of work. The cameras are all tethered and wired. You have to test everything. It's a pretty involved process. But that's where we are now with people wanting stuff instantaneously.
Right. No question about it. So we are here with senior official NBA photographer Nat Butler. If you guys have any questions, please put them in the question box. Do not put them in the live feed because they'll get lost as we're talking. So you talk about getting to the arena 5 hours early for a 7:30 game. You're there at 2 o'clock.
Right.
You're a married man with children. So talk about the sacrifices that your wife and your family have to make for you to do such an incredible job.
It's a great point because that is it is tough on the family because, as you know, with sports, you're working a lot of nights, you're working weekends, you're certainly working holidays. When my kids were younger, I worked every day on Christmas, for 20 plus years working games on Christmas. So it does take its toll on personal family life. You just have to sort of, life is all about that balance during the off season or when I'm home. My kids are older now, but even when they were young, like phone off, no computer. Like when I was home, I was home, But it is a sacrifice. When my kids were younger and playing ball, I would want to be at their games, but I would be at a game, you know, that kind of
Right.
thing. And you just have to, like a lot of people, you have to, you know, you have to do your job, and but just balance it out with the family life, and it's not easy.
Right. No, absolutely. I can just only imagine that. So, like I know I've come to the arena early a couple times. I've talked to you prior to games, and there's photographers all over the place. Obviously, you don't do this by yourself. You know what I mean? So I know James Ridley works closely with you. Talk about,
Yep.
do you have a team of people, and how do you put them in place for each game so that you get the proper shots?
You know what? James has been with me a number of years now as my like number one assistant, um, and they help out tremendously because you can't do it all yourself. I have another guy, a Rutgers guy, David Nemec, that has been working with me of late. Over the years, I've had any number of people, and they are a big part of what we do, because you can't do it all yourself, you know.
Right.
You have to delegate certain things, and then once the game starts, like I got to focus on the game. I can't get bogged down with some of the other stuff, like a guy like James is monitoring the different cameras, making sure everything is working, because it's a live event. You know, I gotta focus on that, and working with people like that, they're professionals, and it lets me focus on my job. It's definitely a team effort. And then
Mm-hmm.
on the backside, we have those images going into the office. Like I said, there's a whole nother team of editors there that are doing their thing, you know.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
very much a team effort.
Mm-hmm. So take me through a shot. So somebody shoots the ball, LeBron gets the rebound, and LeBron's coming down the court. When do you start shooting? Is there some anticipation, or is everybody shooting at different time? Like, how do you set up
Well,
for the perfect shot?
that's a great question, because a lot of people don't realize like what I do is entirely different from the guy sitting next to me who's working for a newspaper. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we're using different equipment. We have what we call strobe lights up in the ceiling,
Mm-hmm.
and I can only shoot like one. I do one shot every 4 seconds. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like a play comes and you're ripping through on a motor, which someone from the
Right.
newspaper is able to do. So it's just like it's a difficult undertaking, and it's like anything else. You try to perfect your craft in that regard, but you literally get one shot. You know, I'm
Right.
not shooting thousands upon thousands of frames. Each play, I'll get
Right.
one shot. I'm dodging players, dodging the ref a little sometimes, you know.
Right.
So it's just years of experience like that.
So you said that you're basically Knicks and Nets. So
Right.
so today I posted one of your pictures of Pat Ewing celebrating after they won game 7 and went to the finals and stuff
Yep.
like that. So
Yeah.
you've been around for some of the, we're in a bad time as Knicks fans right now, but you were there and obviously caught some of the great moments that we still remember. Talk about what you feel like is maybe your most iconic shot.
You know what? Like I'll have a favorite for a while, and then like I want something else. I want something new. You know, I want something better. That Patrick shot, as a grew up a Knicks fan, was obviously special to me. Over the years, I got to know Patrick, and I was just so happy for him in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, getting to go to the finals. Uh, Knicks fans, I just posted it the other day. The Starks, uh, the Starks dunk over the
Yes.
Bulls. You know, that was a
Yes.
pretty big moment for any Knicks fans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, over the years, I've been fortunate to have been at a lot of great events. Um, and it's like you don't have a favorite kid. I don't have a favorite image. They all do bring back a lot of different memories at different times. Where Michael taking off from the foul line during the slam dunk contest, you know,
Right.
um, to now doing stuff with LeBron. But I'm always I'm always looking for the next best great one, you know.
Right.
And thankfully, you know, over the years I've been very fortunate and have gotten lucky a few times.
Yeah, nah, I would definitely say that you got lucky more than a few times. So talk about how the top of the basket, you know, like the cameras on the top of the basket. Like
Right.
how do you guys like do you guys trigger those? Like, you know what I mean? Like how do
Yeah,
you take
and that's
pictures for
no,
those?
exactly. That's I'm triggering those, but that's what we were alluding to and talking about before about getting there so early, testing things out, and where the you know the assistants and stuff come into play. Like I go into the garden, or if you're on a flight flying someplace, they have 5 or 6 cases of equipment. You know,
Mm-hmm.
schlepping the stuff around, and we set those cameras up every night. You take them down after every game, but people love those different angles. You know, that one in the backboard shot because it draws you in, and that's the one thing about basketball. They're ridiculous athletes, but they're not wearing a helmet. They're not wearing a face shield. Like you can feel the intimacy of the players. You know,
Right.
and that particular camera, um, people love. Now, having said that, oftentimes we'll come up with something and then TV loves that angle and we get bounced for a TV camera. Happens quite a bit as well because you know they're the ones paying the big money for broadcast rights. So then we try to work with them if we can squeeze our camera next to theirs or something like that. But our pictures go to you know X number of people that the broad TV broadcast goes you know live to the whole world as well.
So you've had to shoot hundreds of thousands of pictures in your years. When you say like you take the picture and then you send it over to it goes right to the NBA.
Right.
Do you own the rights or through a contract? Like who owns the rights to every picture that you take? Like, and when they post them, like, do they have to, you know, do they have to approve them with you, or maybe they don't
Right.
because you
No,
said they put them
no.
on social media
Yeah,
right
yeah.
away?
Good questions. We have like a, you know, a joint copyright or whatever. I work for the NBA. So ultimately they do control the images. NBA has a licensing agreement with Getty Images. I'm sure people are familiar with that. And that Getty's a partner of the NBA. And the images also go to Getty and they put them out, you know, through their channels throughout, you know, throughout the world. And you know I can do certain things with my images. I've obviously been at the NBA a long time. We have a great relationship. You know, it's we have like a non-compete kind of thing. I'm not going to do anything, you know, to jeopardize that.
Yes.
I'm finally working on a book. People have been clamoring, when you're going to do this, when you're going to do that. So I'm in the
Yeah.
beginning stages of a little bit of a greatest hits album. Um,
Nice.
but it's all good, and I'm so thankful for my time with the NBA, and I'm looking for a lot more years to keep it together. You know, I see one question here. I haven't. There's Click Photos asking if the images are ever retouched, which is another good question because we're considered, you know, shooting editorially. The images are not retouched,
Mhm.
you know, so we have to be dialed in and get it as perfectly as possible coming out of the camera.
Right.
That, and that's for our the NBA social media or Getty Images has a pretty stringent policy where you can't do any Photoshop or anything to the images. Now, if it was done commercially, if
Mhm.
there's a Jordan crazy dunk and Nike wants to use that picture, they're a partner of the NBA, they could, if it's done commercially, they can then maybe manipulate the background or do something, you know, to make the background dark or something like that. But we can never do that or anything on Getty Images. We can't do that.
Right. Okay. So now you worked your first finals in 1984?
I started in '84. My first finals and first All-Star were '86.
In
Um,
'86. Okay.
right. Finals was Houston, Boston, and the
Uh-huh.
All-Star game was in Dallas, and that was the year Spud Webb won the slam dunk contest, which was nuts. Um, and been to every finals and every All-Star game since '86.
Mm, that's crazy. That's crazy. And when it comes to the finals, like, do you ever like? Has there ever been a time in anything, not just the finals, where you found yourself watching the game, or were you so locked into your job, like you know what I mean? Like, I might forget to take some pictures because the
Yeah,
game is getting good.
right. No, you have to stay you have to stay locked in. It's your job. Even like I said, I grew up a Knicks fan when the Knicks were in those heavy, intense games with the Bulls, or the 2 years they did make it to the finals. Like, you couldn't let your rooting interest interfere with your job. I do a lot of
Right.
Brooklyn stuff, and I'm tight with a lot of those guys, and like secretly you could be pulling for them, but you have a job to do. And you know I'll use a timeout to look at the clock, look at the score, and you have
Mhm.
to stay in the game because you never know what's going to happen, and you can't miss any of those moments.
Right. And are you guys like, are you clued in? Like, let's say LeBron's supposed to get his 30,000 point tonight, or his 10,000 assists, or you know what I mean? Like, are you guys aware of that on your own and know that's coming up? Because I'm sure it's important that you make sure that you get that 30,000 point or that
Yeah,
10,000
like
rebound.
if it's something big like that, yes. And again, it's tough. It's a live event. You could have a player walk in front of you, a referee walk in front of you, or something. And it's a tough. It's a it's a it's a tough thing. You can't orchestrate. Hey, can you do it again, Ron? I missed the shot. Can you do it again?
Right.
I just saw a question from Alex. I'm a big fan of your work, by the way. He was asking what kind of strobes we use. We use speedotrons in most of the NBA arenas, and it's more of a technical question for some of the photographers. But ever since way back when in the Sports Illustrated days, speedotron was the brand that we use, basically because of the durability. There are some other things that might be sexier, newer units, but the night in, night out pounding, the speedotrons have been phenomenal for, you know, 30 years of using them. And Alex, I'm a big fan of your work, by the way.
What kind of cameras do you use? Do you use Canon? Like, is there a certain camera that you use that you're more comfortable with?
You know what? I'm currently using Canon. I started with Nikon. We used to shoot on what um, we used to call 2.25 Hasselblads. Um, I loved shooting on Hasselblad. It was a more thought-provoking way of shooting. You weren't bang, bang, bang. Like, it was,
Mhm.
following the action, focusing. I loved doing that. And I
Right.
switched from Hasselblad to Canon when we went to digital, was about 2004.
Okay.
So, and they're all good. Canon, Nikon, they're all good. Sony's making a big push now into things. It's sort of what you're accustomed to. They're all pretty comparable.
Hmm.
But I love, I'm very. It's like a baseball player. You get comfortable with that 34-ounce bat. You're not going to go to 32 or 35. Like, you're just in your zone. And
Hmm.
similar to the athletes, you're in your comfort zone. I pick up a camera, I need to know and trust in the gear,
Right.
and that just focusing on my job.
Absolutely. So, are there special lenses? Like, you don't just use one lens during a game? Like, what type of lenses do you use too for like certain shots, or is there one particular one that you use most of the game, or how do you figure that out?
No, we switch now. Back in the day, we all used fixed lenses, which means it was a fixed focal length. It didn't focus. It didn't zoom in and out with focal length. Now the zooms are very good quality. The image quality is good. So we use different zoom lenses in my what we call handheld. The remotes are different, but you'll see some of the older pictures like, oh, an MJ shot. Why did I chop off his foot? People want to see his sneaker, you know. Well, it was
Right.
it's a fixed focal length. If it was a 135 millimeter lens at the time or something, you didn't have a choice. Now, you know, because of the action we are able to use, because of the advances in technology, the zoom lenses are pretty good quality. So you can shoot head to toe, you zoom in and you can zoom out. And that has made our jobs a lot easier for sure.
No question about it. So back to the finals. So the question I always ask is like, imagine like there's pandemonium everywhere, right? And then you got to go into the locker room and
Right.
they spraying champagne all over the place. Like, how do you prepare for that? Like, how do you prepare for that? Or can you prepare for that? Or are you just crossing your fingers?
Well, again, these are all great questions. Like the locker room, I've tested different things. You know, I have friends that are surf photographers. They use the water housing. They go underwater. I've tested out a million different things. But in those moments, I bring two cameras and I don't put them in a bag or put them in a housing because you lose some of the quality, you know, or it gets foggy, or, you know, it gets you see sweaty guys in a confined locker room, and then the champagne, and it gets very humid in there. So it is a little bit of a crapshoot of, you know, you shoot, the camera gets hammered. There was one year where Shaq literally dumped an entire bottle of champagne over me and the lens. The camera's toast, so I have to reach. I have a little backpack. I reach in and quick switch to another one. You know,
Right.
but those are the shots that, as a fan, I love to get and love to see, because it makes the guys so much more human. You know.
Right.
And you're so appreciative of how hard they work to get to that point. You just want to be able to document it, and thankfully, you know, get a couple of pictures that represent that.
Absolutely. So did Shaq ever reimburse you for that camera?
You know, he's done it in other ways. One of the all-time nice guys is Shaq.
No, I believe it. No, I
So
believe it.
just a good dude who happened to be one of the best basketball players of all time. He would be successful in any job, any career. All-time nice guy.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. So, you know, obviously we're in this pandemic right now, and you know, you're not at games and stuff. So like, what are you doing in the off time? Like, I know your server must be crazy. Like, talk about like the server of pictures that you have at home, and do you find yourself just going back through them right now that you have a little bit of downtime?
You know what? Yes, and I've never had this much time off ever
Mhm.
before. Ben, yeah, I miss you too, man. Like literally, I would be doing playoffs somewhere now, you know. And it's the one thing about the NBA season is it's a long season. It's a grind, you know. But I have been home, and I've been going through, like everyone is watching The Last Dance,
Yeah.
the Jordan doc. I've been going through some old stuff and posting. You know, I typically don't post a lot of MJ stuff. I post more of the, you know, current players now, but people have really responded well to seeing some of those old MJ shots, and it's been fun for me to go through the archive a little bit and
Mhm.
dig out some of these photos that people haven't seen before.
So you're talking about, the MJ project. You talked about, you know, coming out with the book at some point. Have you thought about doing any film yourself, like with all the footage that you have? Like, you know, do you think about doing any film projects?
No, you know, like a lot of these cameras we use now they do shoot video as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I typically I play around with it with some of the kids or the dogs, shooting some video. But typically I'm focused on the stills, And
Mhm.
you know, I love doing that. And some ways it's easier, some ways it's more difficult. You don't have that moving picture to tell the story. You have to shoot, you know, you have to have that one still image tell the story, you know.
Right.
um,
Right.
so that's been my, you know, career to date. Maybe segue a little bit, but I still love it. I still enjoy it, and I think the people still love those dynamic still frames. Um,
Absolutely. Were you involved with any of the Olympic teams? Like, did you shoot the dream team at
you
all?
know
Were
what?
you in Barcelona?
I saw a couple of those questions. Yes, yes, I was, and that was a crazy time for everybody. It was
Had
the
to be.
first time the pros were uh, at the Olympics. No one really knew what to expect, but it literally, we were together 5 weeks. It was literally like being with the Beatles. You know,
Right.
you couldn't leave the hotel. There was 500 people sitting outside the hotel, whether it was 3 in the morning, like 2 in the afternoon, like people just constantly around that team. And it was just cool. Again, I'm a fan, you know. I knew a couple of the players. I went to college with. Chris Mullen was on the team. He was at St. John's, obviously. Patrick Ewing, I knew a little bit. But that was my first introduction to Magic, and people like that I hadn't really spent much time. Michael, it was like the passing of the torch with, you know, he had coming off his championship, and Bird was a little toasty. His back was just shot.
Yeah.
But getting to hang with those guys and getting to know them and then document that. Andy was on the trip, and you see a lot of these images 30 years later, and it's literally a time capsule of NBA history. You know,
Hmm.
it was a really special time.
Yeah, no, it was very, very special. So now fast forward, you know, like the NBA game and with social media now and everything, like it's just become a phenomenon. Talk about like the fashion shows, like before you even get on the court, right? So like guys are coming into the arena, like that's almost like a show in itself, like because everybody got their outfits
Right.
on and like talk about that a little bit.
No, 100%. Like, I'm definitely more of an old school guy, but it's a different world. We used to shoot, you know, we call them the arrival shot. We used to shoot that like for the finals or something, or maybe at All Star, because the guys come, you know, dressed to the nines for the All Star game. But now we do it every game because it's become such a big part of the NBA and who these guys are. And it, you know, primarily started being driven by the sneaker companies and stuff. And the guy's wearing like a crazy pair of Nikes or something, you know. Now, then it's evolved into the apparel, whether it's the clothes or a watch or sunglasses. Like, it's literally, the guys have a fashion show before every game, you know.
Right, right.
And it is funny, the guys are 20 somethings. Everyone's into social media. I'll get a text, yo, are you ready? I'm coming in 10 minutes, you know. And then they come walking in, and then it's like, bro, when can I get the picture? I was like, can you focus on the game? I got, like, I'm working, you know.
Yeah,
But it's a big part of it, and it's cool because it opens up a whole nother audience of people, you know. And it's all good. I'm like, you're not going to do something that's bad. The guys are into it. I tell a story all the time. I would never have done that with Larry Bird walking into the arena. You'd have the, you know, the death stare of all time if you
yeah,
tried to.
right.
But it's a different time. The guys do, for the most part, they do enjoy it. Guys that aren't into it, you know, they're not into it, so I don't take their picture, you know. But it has opened up a whole avenue of branding for the guys individually. And, you know, the Nike, it's such a big part of the sneaker culture of what the guys are
Right,
wearing, you know.
right. No, absolutely. But so you said like they'll text you before the game. So is that something that's given to them by the NBA, or have you built relationships with certain players, obviously over the years? Like, and how do you build those relationships? Like, do they approach you,
You know what?
or
It's a little of both. NBA has a social media group that works hand in hand with the players. You can even see during this pandemic all the stuff that NBA is doing on Instagram Live and stuff. They have a great relationship with the players. And then individually, if I'm at, you know, the Nets, for example, you know, if I'm doing 50 games of them a year, you get to know the guys and you develop relationships with them, and it goes from there, you know. And it's just fun. They're all good guys. They keep getting younger and younger. The players do, but it's all good, and like we work together, you know. If they're into it when they walk in, the photos look better, you know. Simple as that. So it's a good partnership like that.
Okay. So I think one of the biggest questions, and, you know, as I looked into my question box, you know, one of the questions that were asked, you know, kind of multiple times is how does somebody get into the world of sports photography, or how does somebody become an NBA photographer? What advice would you have for
Right.
them?
No, and I get asked that question all the time. You know, people are emailing me or hitting me up on a DM or something, and I do try to get back to most of the people. Hopefully, I don't offend someone if I don't get back to you. But I view it as, you know, any other profession or any other career. You know, that you have to work at your craft. You have to put the time in. You know. I think the popularity of photography now in the social media age, people taking pictures with their phones, like, is all good, but you have to put the time in, you know. If you went to law school, if you were fortunate enough to go to law school, you don't graduate law school and then argue a case in front of the Supreme Court as a 1 or 2 year lawyer. You know what I mean? You work and you build that up. Oftentimes I just advise people, you know, go down to the park, start shooting, go to your local town, shoot high school games, you know, work your way up. There's not as many opportunities now working for newspapers, because that business has changed so much. But it is like any other job or career where you have to start and work at it and develop your talent and your abilities. So when you do get that opportunity, you can seize that opportunity, and don't worry about equipment. You know, you don't need a fancy camera. These cameras now are pretty inexpensive, comparatively. You don't need all professional type stuff. Just focus on, you know, working on your craft and developing your talent as a photographer.
Absolutely. So if I wanted to take some pictures at an NBA game, how difficult is it to get a credential at an NBA game?
Well, it has become more and more difficult, you know, simple as that, because of space restrictions around the court. Now in a lot of NBA arenas, the number of photo positions are very, very limited for a number of reasons. There's more and more, I mentioned it earlier, there's more and more TV cameras everywhere. There's more and more fans. The fans keep getting a little closer, a little more intimate to the court. They don't want someone sitting there not paying crazy money for a seat and then have somebody sit in front of them. You know,
Right.
there are different, we call them safety lanes. There are different lanes that the players use as run throughs, so you can't be in certain positions that way. So it is becoming more and more difficult to get credentials, which makes it all the more important to work on that craft, and then through you know, a local newspaper or an agency or something that you might have an opportunity one day to do that. You want to be prepared when you get that call.
Absolutely. So as we wind down, I have some questions that I want to ask you. So my first one is your most photogenic player.
You know what? Tough one. I might go. We always like the guys that handle the ball a lot. Like Magic was it for years because he handled Michael. For now, I'm a huge Kyrie fan. You
Yes.
know, he was banged up a lot this year, but the way he's like mesmerizing with his handles, you don't know if he's gonna do something to cross over and pull up for a jumper or drive and finish. He has a crazy left hand. So the guys that handle the ball are always fun. But personally, I'm a big Kyrie fan. Someone like LeBron is different. He has a more physical kind of game, but you know, it's like I said, they're freak athletes. It's fun. You can go down the list to any number of guys.
Right. Most exciting game you ever shot?
You know what? I've been fortunate. There's been so many. You know, um, going back to the Bulls, Knicks, the way back to Magic, like Celtics, Lakers. More recently, uh, you know, Cavs being down 3-1 and coming back. Um, LeBron has that block. Kyrie
Mm-hmm.
hits that three. It was insane, you know.
Yeah.
Games like that. It's just, oh, again, it's like an adrenaline rush. You're looking for the next high of the game, and they'll provide it for sure. You know, there's
Yeah.
been so many emotional games over the years that I can't pick one.
Absolutely. Was there ever a time where you missed a shot and were like, just like, Jesus, I missed that shot?
Yes, thankfully, doesn't happen too often.
Mm-hmm.
The shot I missed, although I try to tell myself it wasn't as good an angle because I was on the other side of the court, was 2000 Olympics when Vince jumped over Frederick Weiss. You
Yes.
know, the Olympics are a grind. You shoot like 4 or 5 games a day. You do men one game, women the next, um, and it gets to be a little bit of a grind. So I did not get that shot. It was on the other end of the court, so it wouldn't have been as visual. That's why I justify it telling myself. But I was looking. I had the camera. I wasn't shooting. And the second it happened, I was like, "Oh my God!" And then I panned to the bench and had some crazy stuff of the guys
Yeah.
literally going bananas. KG on the bench was going bananas, which was
Yeah.
cool. But um, I did not get that shot. And the crazy story to that is the Olympics, like there's a million things going on. Getty happens to be the official photographer of the Olympics. The guy that got the
Mm-hmm.
best shot of that, literally Vince jumping over the guy, it was, I think, the first basketball game he ever shot. Like,
Wow.
how does that? You could shoot tens of thousands of games and never do that. Drawing a blank on his name, but he was professional, prepared, got the shot. You know, so
Wow.
that keeps the juices flowing for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're all done, whenever that is, 20, 30 years from now, what do you want your legacy to be?
You know what? I just want to, like, when I meet people and they say, like you said, oh, I had your posters on the wall. It's cool for me when I go to someone's house and you see my pictures on, NBA players' wall, like stuff like that. You know, I'm a huge fan. You brought some joy to me as a young kid or whatever, watching basketball. It's not, it's not brain surgery. And during these times we're in now, like what I do compared to what's going on in the world is very meaningless. A lot of people have much more important jobs and things, and I think if we take away from what is happening now in the world, if we can give those people, the frontline workers and teachers and people like that, a lot more credit, I think we'll all be better off. I have an opportunity to photograph a game, which is kind of crazy, you know. Uh, it's been a lot of fun. I have a lot left in the tank. I have a lot more I want to accomplish, but just keep it in perspective as well. That would be important to me.
Very well said. And my last question is, if you could photograph 3 people, dead or alive, in any arena, it doesn't have to be NBA, who would they be?
That's a tough one. You know what? I've been very fortunate. I've photographed 5 or 6 presidents. Um, I would love to be able to do a portrait or sit down and talk. You know, this past February, I spent some time with Barack at an event, and was so great for me. When you're doing a portrait, I'd like to be able to sit down and talk, you know, and just get to know someone a little bit. I'm a big music guy. I've shot Springsteen from, you know, concerts and stuff. I would love to be able to, just as a fan, and talk to him. And he has influenced me with his the poetry of some of his music and lyrics. You know, so to do a portrait of him would be great. And I don't know, I've been pretty fortunate for my NBA people. I got to photograph Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, and, you know, things like that. So I'd have to I'll have to think on, well, next time we do this, I'll come up with the third one.
The third one. All right, sounds good.
Right?
Sounds good to me. So since I've been doing these podcasts, you know, I've been researching other people's podcasts. So I'm going to do something with you that I've never done before in any of my podcasts. So
Okay.
one of the podcasts that I watch a lot is called All That Smoke with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson. And
Yep.
generally at the end of the show, Steven Jackson does what he's called a begging segment, where he asks his guests for something. So my first and only begging segment that I'm going to do is, when you come out with your book, I am going to purchase that book, but I would like for you to autograph that book for me.
We'll do that, and maybe we can save on the purchase price, even because from my I take care of my Bonic roots. Right?
Yes, indeed.
And
yes, indeed.
I tell you what, you never forget. No matter what business you're in, what profession you never forget your roots. And I have so many fond memories of my peeps from out east. So we will. That's a deal. We'll do that.
I appreciate you. I definitely appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking your time, and everybody for coming out here. This is going to be on our YouTube channel, but follow Positive Impact Podcast on YouTube and on Instagram and on Anchor. Nat, thank you again so much, and I can't wait to see you back on the baselines again.
Thank you. Stay safe, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We didn't get to all the questions, but thanks people, and reach out, hit me on a DM or something, and I'll be